Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
My word.
Government support for households is greatly appreciated, but high energy costs are also causing massive problems for businesses and particularly energy-intense manufacturing. Will the Prime Minister support the Repowering the Black Country initiative, backed by the LEP and by Andy Street, to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, and will he meet with me to look at how the Black Country can be a pilot project to decarbonise, reduce costs and protect the region's manufacturing jobs?
Well, I thank my honourable friend that he's a great champion for Dudley and for the Black Country, and in addition to the £1,200 for the 8 million most vulnerable households that we're providing, £400 to help everybody with the cost of energy, Mr. Speaker. We're supporting the Black Country with cost-efficient energy infrastructure, and the region has already received £1.5 million to develop a cluster plan for decarbonisation.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I pay tribute to all those who served in the Falklands? My uncle was among them, serving on the HMS Antelope when it went down. Thankfully, he made it back, but too many serving in that war didn't, and we remember them all. Mr. Speaker, Britain is set for lower growth than every major economy except Russia. Why?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, well, I'll tell him. Mr. Speaker, actually, we are going to have, according to the IMF and the OECD, we are, in addition to the fastest growth in the G7 last year, we're going to have the second fastest this year, and we will return to the top of the table, Mr. Speaker. But the reason, Mr. Speaker, other countries are temporarily moving ahead is, of course, because we came out of the pandemic faster than they did, because we took the right decisions to come out of lockdown, which he opposed, Mr. Speaker. And that's why, right now, Mr. Speaker, we have the highest number of people on payroll employment on record,
Mr. Speaker, he always likes to blame global forces, but global forces are just that, global. Everybody faces them. Britain isn't under crippling economic sanctions like Russia. No wonder he doesn't want to answer the question, why is the UK set for lower growth than every other major economy?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think everybody can see that I've just answered the question. Once again, he's guilty of what my legal friends call ignoratio elenchi. He's failed to listen to what I've actually said, Mr. Speaker. What would be useful in supporting the UK economy right now would be if the leader of the Labour Party ended his sphinx-like silence about the RMT strikes coming up in the course of the next couple of weeks. Will he now break with his shadow Transport Secretary and denounce Labour's rail strikes?
He's in government.
Just to remind the Prime Minister, he seems to have gone. His Prime Minister's question is not opposition question. Keir Starmer.
He's in government. He could do something to stop the strikes, but he hasn't lifted a finger. I don't want the strikes to go ahead, but he does. He wants, Mr. Speaker, he wants the country to grind to a halt so he can feed off the division. And as for Mr. Speaker, as for his boasting about the economy, he thinks he can perform Jedi mind tricks on the country. These aren't the droids you're looking for. No rules were broken. The economy is booming. The problem is, the Force just isn't with him anymore. He thinks he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. The truth is, he's Jabba the Hutt. Last week, he stood there and boasted that we would continue to grow the economy. This week, it turns out, the economy shrank for the second month in a row. How does it help Britain to have an ostrich Prime Minister with his head in the sand?
Prime Minister. There he goes again, Mr. Speaker, running this country down when everybody we've got the highest employment, payroll employment.
Look, I want to hear the questions and the answers, and whether you like it, but I genuinely believe it, the public who watch it also want to hear both. Prime Minister.
I mean, Mr. Speaker, we've got lower unemployment than France, Germany, Italy, Canada. We've got the highest number of people in payroll jobs, as I've just said, 620,000 more since records began. And he might like to know this, that just in the first 5 months of this year, this country has attracted, I think, £16 billion of investment in its tech sector. He doesn't like these European comparisons. Let's make it for him. 3 times as much as Germany, twice as much as France, Mr. Speaker. He should be talking this country up, not running it down.
That's the ostrich. He's not just denying how bad things are, he's actively making things worse. His 15 tax rises are throttling growth, and the director of the CBI is so fed up, he's reduced to saying, can we stop Operation Say Big Dog and move to action stations on the economy? Now, Mr. Speaker, we know what the Prime Minister says about British business in private. I think that's pretty unparliamentary. But when did screwing business turn from a flippant comment into economic policy?
Well, Mr. Speaker, look, I just reminded the House of what's happening in Tech Week in this country, the massive investment that's coming in, helped, by the way, by this 130% super deduction for business investment that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has put in. Never forget, Mr. Speaker, that Labour, under Labour, taxes go up on businesses and on people. We're not only putting £1,200 more into people's pockets, we're having a tax cut worth £330. He talks about taxes, £330 on average for everybody who pays national insurance. Labour have already made spending commitments in this Parliament alone worth £94 billion more than the government is spending. That's £2,100 for every household in the country, Mr. Speaker. No wonder no Labour government has ever left office with unemployment lower than when they came in.
Mr. Speaker, 15 tax rises, and we're sacked for the highest tax burden since rationing. He says the economy is booming when it's shrinking. He's game playing so much. He thinks he's on Love Island. Trouble is, Prime Minister, I'm reliably informed that contestants that give the public the ick get booted out. And it's not just low growth. He's also lost control of inflation. He was warned about this last September. And what did he do? He dismissed it. He didn't act. He sat on his hands. Now prices are through the roof, and we're set to have the highest inflation in the G7. When will he accept he got it badly wrong when he claimed that worries about inflation were unfounded?
Mr. Speaker, we're helping people with the cost of living with £1,200 on the 14th of July. The money will be going into people's bank accounts. Why can we do that, Mr. Speaker? Because we have the fiscal firepower to do it, because the economy is in robust shape, with record numbers of people in payroll employment, Mr. Speaker. And that is thanks to the steps that we took that he continuously opposed. And if he wants to, and I just remind Mr. Speaker, he has a chance. I won't say this interrogatively, Mr. He has the chance now to clear it up. He can oppose the Labour's rail strikes right now. Say he can disagree. He can disagree, and give him that opportunity. Let him disagree with the union barons who would add to people's costs in the coming weeks.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want the strikes to go ahead. He does so he can feed on the division. Mr. Speaker, they're making a lot of noise now, but I've got a long list here of what his MPs really think of him. Yeah. Dragging everyone down. Who said that? Come on. Who was it said that? Authority is destroyed. Come on, hands up. Which of you was it? Which of you? Come on. Can't win back trust. Anybody owning up? You're very quiet now. Hands. Mr. Speaker, my personal favourite is this. This is a document circulated by his backbench, in which they call him the Conservative Corbyn. Exactly. Prime Minister, I don't think that was intended as a compliment. Week after week, he stands there and spouts the same nonsense. The economy's booming. Everything's going swimmingly. The people should be grateful. But whilst he's telling Britain that we never had it so good, millions of working people and businesses know the reality. Britain's growth is going to be slower than our competitors and our inflation higher. A Prime Minister who sounds totally deluded, totally failing on the economy, failing to tackle...
I think we need to get to the end of the question, but I'll just remind you, I will hear the end of the question in silence. Any more noise in this corner, it'll be another cup of tea early if we're not careful. Here's
a Prime Minister who sounds totally deluded, totally failing the economy, failing to tackle inflation, failing to back business, failing to help working people through the crisis. And, Mr. Speaker, his big idea, go back to imperial measurements. He's got 80s inflation, 70s stagnation, now he wants 60s weights to complete the set. When is he going to ditch the gimmicks and face up to reality that under him Britain's economy is going backwards?
Let's see the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, a couple of quick points about Mr. Corbyn, the Right Honourable for Islington North. First of all, he tried repeatedly to get him elected as Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker. Secondly, speaking from experience, he's relatively dynamic by comparison with the Right Honourable gentleman, Mr. Speaker. Dynamic and coherent.
Might be helpful if you speak to me. I'm struggling to hear because of the noise on both sides. So please, if you look to the chair, it'll be easier for both of us.
But what we're going to get on and do, Mr. Speaker, is continue to take the tough decisions to take this country forward, and decisions that are on the side of the British people, Mr. Speaker. They're blatantly on the side of the RMT union barons. When there are some ticket offices that barely sell one ticket per hour, Mr. Speaker, we are on the side of the travelling public. By the way, he hasn't mentioned this, but they're on the side of the people traffickers who would risk people's lives at sea, Mr. Speaker. And we are on the side of people who come here safely and legally. Safely and legally, Mr. Speaker. They carp and snipe from the sidelines. That's what they've always done. We take the big decisions to take this country forward. And no matter how much welly his Right Honourable friend, the Deputy Leader, may ask him to apply, it doesn't matter how much welly he pretends to apply, when that welly, Mr. Speaker, is always on the left foot.
Many areas like mine have already had massive new housing development with no commensurate increase in general practice.
Sorry. Point of order. The Honourable Lady's been here for so long, she should also know that points of order can only come at the end. Sandra Sullivan.
Oh dear.
Many areas.
Have a conversation later, but certainly it's not. Wait a minute. Andrew Sullivan.
Many areas like mine have already had massive new housing development with no commensurate increase in general practice capacity. In one of my surgeries, with double the recommended number of patients per GP, a bowel cancer diagnosis of a 51-year-old father of 4 was missed and is now terminal. Getting this right is a life and death issue. So will the Prime Minister make sure that parts of the country that have already had massive new housing growth get the commensurate increase in general practice capacity that is only right and fair?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and of course we've increased the numbers of doctors by 6,000, up to 1,200 more GPs since this time last year, 11,800 more nurses, but we must make sure that areas, particularly where areas of new sensitive development is going in, that there are the infrastructure services, particularly medical services, that they need. The NHS has a statutory duty to take account of population growth. I know he's met my honourable friend, the Health Secretary. I will take it up personally to make sure we get a proper approach to, I think, a very, very important issue.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I join you and others that are remembering today the Falklands conflict of 40 years ago, and those like my colleague Keith Brown, the Scottish Justice Minister, that served there, and in particular our thoughts are with those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. Mr. Speaker, yesterday our First Minister started a national conversation on Scotland's right to choose an independent future. When we look at nations like Iceland, Ireland, Norway and Denmark, it is clear that our neighbours are outperforming the United Kingdom. They deliver greater income equality, lower poverty rates, higher productivity, social mobility and business investment. Mr. Speaker, the list goes on and on. The evidence is overwhelming. Scotland is being held back by Westminster. Prime Minister, all those countries can use the powers of independence to create wealthier, fairer and greener societies. Why not Scotland?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't doubt my right honourable friend's talents as a conversationalist, but I think there are other subjects in the national conversation right now, and they include, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing to come through the aftershocks of COVID with the strongest jobs-led recovery of any European economy. As I said, 620,000 more people across the whole of the UK, Mr. Speaker, in payroll employment than there were before the pandemic began. And I think another subject of national conversation is investment into our whole country, investment in Scotland, investment across the whole of the UK, as I mentioned already, in the tech centre, and the whole of the UK standing strong together on the international stage and sticking up for the Ukrainians. I think that's some of the things that the country is also talking about, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Yes, stronger together. As the Prime Minister seen the pound, I think the financial markets are giving their judgment on this Prime Minister. You know, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister can afford to live in his own little world, his own little Britain. But people have to live with the reality of a failing Westminster system. A cost of living crisis worse in the UK than any other G7 country. An inflation rate double that of France. The second worst economic growth forecast in the G20, next to only sanctioned Russia. And now a threat of a trade war with our European friends, triggered by a law-breaking Prime Minister. That is not a vision for the future of Scotland. Our nation is big enough, rich enough and smart enough. Isn't it the case, Prime Minister, that Scotland simply can't afford to remain trapped in the failing Westminster system? Mr. Speaker, stop the world. Scotland wants to get on.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think that the figures speak for themselves. The UK has record numbers of people in payroll employment. That's an astounding thing when you consider where we were during the pandemic. That was because of the UK working well together, as he will remember, with the vaccine rollout, with the testing, which Scotland and the rest of the country cooperated brilliantly. And, Mr. Speaker, he talks about a trade war. He talks about a trade war. What could be more foolish, Mr. Speaker, than a project that actually envisages trade barriers within parts of the United Kingdom? That's what we're trying to break down.
Craig Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the Jubilee celebrations, I was honoured to share part of them with Cohort 4, an inspirational mentoring and support group who provide life-changing support to a wide range of women, such as those who have tragically been the victim of domestic violence, sexual abuse or suffer from mental health difficulties. Sadly, as a result of the pandemic, the need for these services has only grown. So would the Prime Minister join me in thanking Beverley and her team for the incredible work that they do at Cohort 4 and set out what more government can do to support these organisations so they can continue to deliver the vital care to vulnerable men and women across all of our constituencies.
I thank my honourable friend. I want to extend my thanks also to Beverley and everybody in Cohort 4 for what they're doing. The extra support that we're giving includes £140 million of funding for victims' services and £47 million ring-fence, particularly for organisations such as Cohort 4. Thank you to Cohort 4 and similar organisations for everything that they do.
David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in paying tribute to our armed forces and sending our thanks and gratitude to the veterans of the Falklands War and their families? Mr. Speaker, millions of families across our country are suffering because of the cost of living emergency. And people in rural areas are especially hurting, bearing the brunt of record fuel price rises. The Rural Fuel Duty Relief Scheme is supposed to help by taking money off the price of petrol. But some rural counties aren't eligible, like Cumbria, like Shropshire and like Devon. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party want to hear ideas to help those people, and I think the people of Devon will note. Because there are families and pensioners across rural counties who are missing out on this support. So, Mr. Speaker, as petrol prices soar, will the Prime Minister accept our idea to help people in rural counties and expand rural fuel duty relief?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we cut fuel duty for everybody across the country by record sums. He talks about pensioners, Mr. Speaker. We're giving £850 more to every pensioner across the country. And he talks about the cost of energy. Everybody is going to get another £400 to help them with the costs of energy. And the blissful fact about the Liberal Democrats, Mr. Speaker, is people don't actually know what their policies are. And they're able to go around the country. They're able to go around the country bamboozling the rural communities, not revealing that they're in fact in favour of massive new green taxes, Mr. Speaker, which is what they want, and not revealing that they would like to go back straight away into the common agricultural policy with all the bureaucracy and all the costs that entails. They don't say that on the doorstep, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There are proposals for up to 10,000 housing units on flood-prone greenfield sites to the west of Ifield in my constituency that would also represent intolerable pressure on local services. Can I have an assurance from the Prime Minister that as we update planning legislation, we will enshrine the brownfield principle first for new developments and save our environment and our services?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is completely right, and we encourage the use of suitable brownfield land, and our policy is for brownfield first, everywhere and always.
Neil Hanby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Prime Minister will know from my recent correspondence that my Kirkcaldy Cowdenbeath constituent, Ruth Zuccarello, is the sister of Jim Fitton, who is currently imprisoned in Iraq and sentenced to 15 years for collecting some shards of pottery. The judge passing sentence did not believe that Mr. Fitton had any criminal intent. And this has obvious and significant implications for Jim and his loved ones. So I would ask the Prime Minister if he would be willing to meet with me and other MPs who have constituents in Jim's family to discuss this case so that we can work in concert to resolve some of those issues.
Well, I'm really grateful to the honourable gentleman for raising Mr. Fitton's case, and I have a great deal of sympathy, I must say, with him. I'll make sure that he gets my honourable gentleman gets a meeting with the relevant minister as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of my youngest constituents, little Nellie Oakshott, is 2 years old and has been diagnosed with metachromatic leukodystrophy. Her very brave parents, Megan and Tom, are supporting a campaign to see MLD added to the newborn blood spot test. Had that been included in the test, Nellie's condition could be treated. Now, the family are squaring up to palliative care and planning to make every day count. Will the Prime Minister give his support to add MLD to this heel prick test so that families in the future can be spared this same heartbreak?
I thank her very much, and I know that the thoughts of everybody will be with Nellie and her parents, Tom and Megan, in a very, very difficult time. And what I can tell her is that the National Screening Committee has received a request to look again at the conditions for doing an MLD test, and that is currently being reviewed right now. But I will make sure that she gets a meeting as soon as possible with the relevant minister.
Liz Twist.
Mr. Speaker, in just 5 days, rail passengers across the UK and in the North East will be facing huge disruption. Do you want to listen?
No, we don't.
But on the eve of the biggest rail dispute in a generation, it's emerged that ministers have not held any talks whatsoever since March. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask the Prime Minister.
You've done out.
I ask the Prime Minister, has he met with trade unions and employers in the rail industry to attempt to bring this dispute to an end? Yes or
no? Mr. Speaker, I noticed that what one union baron was asked about this. He said, "I don't negotiate with the Tory government," is what he said. That's what they said, Mr. Speaker. We all know how much money the Labour front bench take from the RMT, Mr. Speaker. We know why they're sitting on their hands during Labour's rail strikes. They should come out and condemn it, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Pension Credit Awareness Day. Pension credit is currently underclaimed. Around a quarter of those entitled don't claim it. So all my right honourable friend join me in encouraging people in Gedling and throughout the country to check their eligibility, make that claim so we can get more money into the pockets of pensioners.
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's a very, very worthwhile and important campaign that my honourable friend supports. Too many pensioners fail to take up their entitlements under pension credit. It can be worth another £3,300 a year, and the more we can do to make pensioners aware of it, the better.
Anna McMahon.
Thank you. Why is it that the worst people often rise to the highest office and stay there? Not my words about the Prime Minister, but those of his newest appointment, his cost of living czar. Families across Cardiff North, crippled with skyrocketing bills, unable to afford even the most basic necessities, all agree with him, saying this Prime Minister has to go. So if his own Tsar doesn't even have faith in him, tell me why those struggling should.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she's asked that question repeatedly, but let me just remind her that this is a government that gets on and delivers on our promises to the people, and in particular getting Brexit done. I read the other day, Mr. Speaker, that she wants to go back into the single market and into the customs union. I think if that's the real policy of the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, going back into the EU, then why won't the leader of the opposition admit it?
But Timpson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. When our family adopted my two brothers in the 1980s, support for adopters, whether that be financial, therapeutic or professional, was minimal. And by the time I became a family law barrister in the late 1990s, it really wasn't much better. Efforts since, particularly the Adoption Support Fund from 2015 onwards, has improved the situation, but as ever, there's much more that we can do. And to that end, would my right honourable friend look at making self-employed adopters eligible for statutory adoption pay so they can also have a better and fairer start to family life?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend, and he's a great champion for adopters and all those who help give children a loving and stable home. We've so far focused on supporting, he's quite right, we're focused on supporting employed parents, but local authorities do have the power to provide discretionary payments equivalent to maternity allowance for self-employed adopters as well.
Gary McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that at times of economic hardship, suicide rates are likely to rise too. We saw that after the 2008 crash. So as well as doing more to support people through the cost of living crisis, will the Prime Minister commit to doing more to support excellent suicide prevention campaigns like CALM, the campaign against living miserably, and also implement Labour's pledge that anyone in need of it should be able to access mental health counselling within a month, an end to waiting lists?
Prime Minister.
She's entirely right, Mr. Speaker, and we must focus ever more on mental health. That's why we're putting another £2.3 billion into supporting mental health services, including suicide prevention and the many wonderful charities that help people with their conditions, Mr. Speaker. And you know what I can say is it would be a good thing if across the floor of this House we had support for the spending that we're putting in.
David Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The conflict in Ukraine and the consequent disruption of the supply chain in wheat has highlighted the need for the United Kingdom to become more self-sufficient in food. The Genetic Technology Bill, which has its second reading this afternoon, will help create the conditions to enable English farmers to produce more food of higher quality. But does my right honourable friend agree that the drive to self-sufficiency requires a UK-wide effort? And will he urge the devolved administrations to adopt the provisions of the bill so that farmers across Britain can produce the food that the country needs?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is completely right that currently the policy, of course, the bill only applies to England. He's completely right, but in a loving and sharing way, we are going to work with the devolved administrations, Mr. Speaker, so that the whole of the UK can enjoy the benefits.
Sarah Chaplin.
Mental health support is vital for victims of sexual crimes. When a Rotherham survivor, who's here today, reported her childhood abuse to the police, they told her not to go for counselling as it could be used against her in court. Your Attorney General is challenging the rules, so it's even easier for defence teams to access victims' counselling notes, having an immediate chilling effect. Survivors shouldn't be forced to choose between their mental health and justice. Prime Minister, please stop this.
Well, I'm very interested to hear what she says, and I will look at the evidence that she has. But these are very sensitive and very difficult issues, particularly as regards the defence cases. But if she looks at what's happening, for instance, on rape and serious sexual offences, where we've had very similar problems, we are starting to see gradually an improvement in the prosecution rates, and that is because governments across departments across Whitehall working together to take account of victims' needs. And I agree that progress isn't everything that I would like, but we are seeing progress.
My right honourable friend may be aware that the Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital Trust has recently submitted a revised outline business case in support of its £312 million capital allocation made by the Department of Health 4 years ago. Does he agree with me that in order to make progress and complete the ambitious hospital building programme, the NHS decision-making processes not only need to be levelled up, they need to be speeded up?
Prime Minister.
I think, Mr. Speaker, that the right honourable gentleman certainly speaks for many in this House in wanting faster decisions on planning in the NHS. But what you also, and that's what we're doing, we're pushing through, as he knows, 40 hospitals 40 hospitals we are building, Mr. Speaker, and what that needs is the funding. And I just tactfully point out again, the opposition benches bellowing away. They voted against the extra £39 billion that we're putting in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Mr. Singh's identity has been stolen. His NHS records are being misused, but he's been advised there is nothing the Health Secretary can do. Crimes are being committed in his name. The Home Secretary's department assured him that this would not affect his immigration status. Yet recently, He, his wife and children were detained by UK Border Force whilst travelling for a family holiday. Can the Prime Minister explain who in his government is responsible for this chaotic incompetence?
Mr. Speaker, I'd be only too happy to look at the. I'm very sorry for the experience that Mr. Singh and his family have had. And she asked who's responsible. I'm responsible, Mr. Speaker, and I take. But I will look at the case. I'll make sure that she gets a proper answer from the Home Office and the Immigration Department.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Dominique Davis, is the niece of Dom Phillips, the British journalist missing in Brazil, alongside the Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira. Will my right honourable friend ensure that the government makes this case a diplomatic priority and that it works to do everything it can to ensure that the Brazilian authorities put the resources necessary to uncover the truth and find out what has happened to Dom and Bruno?
I thank my right honourable friend very much, and I can tell her that for representing the niece of Dom Phillips, and of course, like everybody in this House, we're deeply concerned about what may have happened to him. FCDO officials are working closely now with the Brazilian authorities following his disappearance on the 5th of June. The minister responsible has raised the issue repeatedly. The search and rescue effort with Brazil's Justice and Public Security Minister, and what we've told the Brazilians, Mr. Speaker, is we stand ready to provide, Madam Deputy Speaker, I should say, we stand ready to provide all the support that they may need.
Thank you. Point of order, Selene Saxby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just wondered if you could advise how I could correct the record for the Right Honourable Member for Kingston and Surbiton's question, where he raised the matter of rural fuel duty relief and incorrectly advised that it was not available in Devon, and that in my North Devon constituency, that I clearly know quite well on this side of the House, the EX35 postcode of Linton, their fuel retailers have had access to this duty for some time. How might we address this situation, Madam Deputy Speaker?
Well, order. I thank the Honourable Lady for her point of order. The Chair is not responsible for points made by Honourable and Right Honourable members, but she has put her concerns on the record, so I suggest we leave it at that. Vote to that point of order, Sir Edward Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Honourable Lady for raising the point, not directly, I think, pointing out that vast parts of Devon don't have rural fuel duty relief.
Yeah, I think this is becoming a continuation of Prime Minister's question, so we will leave it at that. Point of order, Yasmin Qureshi.
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister said that the Leader of the Opposition was a supporter of people traffickers. I think that should be taken out of record.
Here. It's a disgrace.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her point of order. Frankly, the level of noise during PMQs meant it was not possible for the Chair to hear everything. But I understand that the Prime Minister, as she says, did say that the opposition was on the side of people traffickers. That seems to me, and I have to say to the Speaker, to fall well short of the good temper and moderation which should characterise our debates. And I say to the Prime Minister and to all members here, we need to refer to each other in this place in more respectful terms. And I'm sure that in that spirit will be adopted in the statement to come. Point of order.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as Chair of the International Trade Committee, it's with dismay of the committee that we found out that the government was to trigger the CRAG process on the Australia-UK FTA before the scrutiny was finished. This, in light of assurances to the Speaker of the House in a letter, assurances on the floor of the House on the 17th of November 2021 at the dispatch book from a Minister of the DIT, and also to the committee itself. that that scrutiny would be allowed to happen before CRAG was triggered. This has not happened. What is happening is the UK is opening and rolling out the red carpet to Australian exporters to the UK, while Australia is not ratifying. Madam Deputy Speaker, we in the committee feel there should be a vote at the very least to delay CRAG. Can you advise us how best we can achieve that end?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order. It has not related directly to PMQs, so it should actually have been taken later. But he has, obviously, ministers should stick to commitments that they have made, and I'm sure he will find a number of ways in order to further the points that he has made. Thank you. Statement, Home Secretary Priti Patel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And with permission, I would like to make a statement about the government's world-leading migration and economic development partnership with Rwanda. The British people have repeatedly voted for controlled immigration and the right to secure borders, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a government that acts and hears that message clearly, and we are determined to deliver that. Last night, Madam Deputy Speaker, we aimed to relocate the first people from our country who arrived here through dangerous and illegal means, including by small boat. Over the course of this week, many and various claims to prevent relocation have been brought forward. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the decisions of our domestic courts, the High Court, the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court to uphold our right to send the flight. However, following a decision by an out-of-hours judge in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, minutes before our flight's departure, the final individuals remaining on the flight had their removal directions paused while their claims were considered. I want to make something absolutely clear today, Madam Deputy Speaker. The European Court of Human Rights did not rule that the policy or relocations were unlawful, but they prohibited the removal of 3 of those on last night's flight. Those prohibitions last for different time periods, but are not an absolute bar on their transfer to Rwanda. Anyone who's been ordered to be released by the courts will be tagged while we continue to progress their relocation. While this decision by the Strasbourg Court to intervene was disappointing and surprising given the repeated and considered judgments to the contrary in our domestic courts, we remain committed to this policy. These repeated legal barriers are, Madam Deputy Speaker, very similar to those that we experience with all other removal flights, and we believe that we are fully compliant with our domestic and international obligations, and preparations for our future flights and the next flights have already begun. Our domestic courts were of the view that the flight could go ahead. Madam Deputy Speaker, the case for our partnership with Rwanda bears repeating. We are a generous and welcoming country, as has been shown time and time again. Over 20,000 people have used safe and legal routes to come to the UK since 2015. And most recently, Madam Deputy Speaker, Britons have opened their hearts and their homes to Afghan nationals and Ukrainian nationals. But our capacity to help those in need is severely compromised by those who come here illegally. And as we've discussed in this House many, many times, who seek to jump the queue because they can afford to pay the people smugglers. It is illegal. It is not necessary because they are coming from other safe countries. It is not fair either on those who play by the rules or on the British taxpayers who have to foot this bill. We cannot keep on spending nearly £5 million a day on accommodation, including that of hotels. We cannot accept this intolerable pressure on public services and local communities. It makes us less safe as a nation because those who come here illegally do not have the regularised checks or even the regularised status. And because evil people smuggling gangs use the proceeds of their ill-gotten gains to fund other appalling crimes that undermine the security of our country. It is also lethally dangerous for those who are smuggled. People have drowned at sea, suffocated in lorries, and perished crossing territories. The humane, decent and moral response to all of this is simply not to stand by and let people down, or to be sold into slavery, or to be smuggled, but to stop this. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, inaction is not an option, or at least not a morally responsible one. This is, as I've said repeatedly, a complex, long-standing problem. The global asylum system is broken, and between 80 to 100 million people are now displaced, and others are on the move, seeking better economic opportunities. And an international problem requires international solutions. The UK and Rwanda have shown the way forward by working together. And this partnership sends a clear message that illegal entry will not be tolerated, Madam Deputy Speaker, while offering a practical, humane way forward for those who arrive to the UK via illegal routes. It has saddened me, Madam Deputy Speaker, to see Rwanda so terribly misrepresented and traduced in recent weeks. It is another example of how all too often critics not only don't know what they're speaking about, but seek to vilify another international country that has a good track record when it comes to refugees and stepping up to international responsibilities. Rwanda, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a safe and secure country with an outstanding track record of supporting refugees and asylum seekers. And indeed, we are proud that we are working together. Proud that the UK is investing in Rwanda and helping that great country to thrive. And proud that those who are relocated to Rwanda will have an opportunity to thrive as well. They will be given generous support, including language skills, vocational training, and help with starting their own businesses or finding employment. But of course, I'm afraid, Madam Deputy Speaker, the usual suspects, with the blessings of honourable and right honourable members opposite, have set out the thought and even campaign against these efforts, and with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, the will of the British people. It would be wrong to issue a running commentary over ongoing cases, but Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to say this. This government will not be deterred from doing the right thing. We will not be put off by the inevitable legal last-minute challenges, nor we will allow mobs, Madam Deputy Speaker, to block removals. We will not stand idly by and let organised crime gangs, who are despicable in their nature and their conduct, evil people, treat human beings as cargo. We will not accept that we have no right to control our borders, Madam Deputy Speaker. We will do everything necessary to keep this country safe, and we will continue our long and proud tradition of helping those in genuine need. Now, many of us have met refugees, both abroad and on British soil, and listened to the stories that are quite frankly chilling and heartbreaking. But of course it suits the benches opposite to pretend that this side of the House doesn't care. But Madam Deputy Speaker, as you referred to in the earlier point of order, on this side of the House, such accusations are a grotesque slur. And let me tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, what is truly chilling is listening to opponents going on about how awful this policy is, while offering no practical solutions, while lives are being lost, helping develop safe and legal routes to this country for those who really need them is absolutely at the heart of this government's work. And having overseen efforts to bring to the UK thousands of people in absolute need, including from Hong Kong, Syria, Afghanistan and Ukraine. And I am the first to say that controlled immigration is good for our country, outstanding for our country, including that by refugees. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, we simply have to focus on the support of those who need it the most, and not those who have picked the UK as a destination over a safe country like France. And it is no use pretending that they are fleeing persecution when they are travelling from a safe country, because our capacity to help is not infinite, and public support for the asylum system will be fatally undermined if we do not act. And along with the critics of the Migration and Economic Development Partnership have no alternative proposal to deal with uncontrolled immigration. And like on so many other issues, the parties opposite, the Labour Party and the SNP, are on the wrong side of the argument, and we will only see with their arguments public trust in the system being corroded. That is irresponsible and utterly indifferent to those who we seek to help and support. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have always said that I will look at all proposals to reduce illegal migration and illegal entry to our country, and even those that the opposite benches might prepare to put forward, but we still wait for them. However, he says that. However, fundamentally, they don't think there is a problem, and that is why they don't have a solution, because they still remain and stand for open borders, pure and simple. Meanwhile, this government wants to get on with delivering, not just on what the British people want, but reforming our systems, so that they are firm, but equally, Madam Deputy Speaker, so that they are fair to those who pay for them and fair on those who need our help and support.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a shambles, and it is shameful, and the Home Secretary has no one but herself to blame. This is not, and never has been, a serious policy, and she knew that when she chartered the plane. She knew that among the people she was planning to send to Rwanda on this plane were torture and trafficking victims. She knew she didn't have a proper screening process in place. She knew that some of them might be children. So can she confirm it was the Home Office itself that withdrew a whole series of these cases on Friday and yesterday because they knew there was a problem with these cases, that even without the European Court of Human Rights judgment, she was planning to send a plane with just 7 people on board because she'd had to withdraw most of the cases at the last minute. She knows that there is a lack of proper asylum capacity in Rwanda to make fair decisions, that as the UNHCR says, they only normally deal with a few hundred cases a year. There's normally only one eligibility officer who prepares the cases, and that's as well as the lack of interpreters or legal advice to ensure fair decisions. Now, she promised there will be extra payments to Rwanda for each person that is transferred, presumably to pay for those extra caseworkers or extra support, but she still refused to tell us how much. So what is she hiding? Will she tell us now how much she promised Rwanda for each of the people she was planning to send yesterday, and how many Rwandan refugees she promised to take in return? She knows that serious concerns have been raised about Rwandan restrictions on political freedom, on the treatment of people who are LGBT, on the fact that 12 refugees were shot by the authorities in 2018 for protesting against food cuts, on the fact that there have been Afghan and Syrian asylum seekers returned by Rwanda, and she knows that none of those concerns have been addressed. She knows too that the policy will not work. We need action to tackle dangerous criminal gangs who are putting lives at risk. But she knows that her policies won't achieve that, and that is not their objective. Because if it was, she would not have asked the National Crime Agency, whose job it is to target the criminal gangs, to draw up 20% staff cuts. That is potentially 1,000 people being cut from the organisation that works to tackle the gangs. So can she confirm, has she asked the NCA to draw up plans for staff cuts? If she was serious, she would be taking seriously the fact that the Israel-Rwanda deal ended up increasing criminal people trafficking and smuggling, and that her plan risks making things worse. And if it was, she would be working night and day to get a better joint plan with France to crack down on the gangs and to stop the boats being put into the water in the first place. But she isn't, because her relationship with French ministers has totally broken down. If she was serious about tackling illegal migration, illegal economic migration, or cutting the bills for people in hotels, she would be speeding up Home Office decision-making so refugees can get support and those who aren't can be returned home. Instead, her decisions have totally collapsed from 28,000 a year to just 14,000 decisions a year, fewer than Belgium, the Netherlands, never mind Germany or France. And she's so badly failing to take those basic decisions, she is trying to pay a country thousands of miles away to take decisions for us instead. How shameful does that make us look around the world if our Home Office cannot take those basic decisions? She knew about problem after problem with her policy. She knows this is unworkable, unethical, and won't stop the criminal gangs. But yet she still went ahead and spent £500,000 chartering a plane she never expected to fly. She still went ahead and wrote a £120 million cheque to Rwanda with a promise of more to come. And she still went ahead because all she really cares about is picking fights and finding someone else to blame. This isn't a long-term plan, it is a short-term stunt. Everyone can see it. It's not serious policy, it's shameless posturing, and she knows it. It's not building consensus, it's just pursuing division. It is government by gimmick. It's not in the public interest, it's just in their political interest. And what are they prepared to trash along the way? People's lives, our basic British values of fairness, decency and common sense, and the reputation of our nation. Our country is better than this. We've a long tradition of hard work and stepping up to tackle problems, not to offload them, to tackle the criminal gangs who put lives at risk, and to do right by refugees. That is what she should be doing now, and not this shambles that is putting our country to shame.
Madam Deputy Speaker, well, I always look forward to these exchanges in the House, it's fair to say. Primarily because, well, perhaps if you'd like to listen to them as well. Let me just respond by saying, as a point of education, if I may, for the Honourable Lady opposite, we're not the only country in the world to be adopting this approach, it's fair to say. The Right Honourable Lady may be aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it's an approach the EU have adopted through their EU transfer mechanism to Rwanda. And Denmark themselves are in the process, already in the process of looking at this. But she raises a number of points which are also factually incorrect. I'll come to you shortly, if you don't mind. That the purpose of the work that we are doing is absolutely, Madam Deputy Speaker, to break the business model of the people smugglers. And it's a shame, actually, that the party opposite, run down the National Crime Agency, because actually, calm down a second, because actually it's the UK intelligence community that are working together, tackling the people smugglers upstream, along with the way in which we invest in upstream programmes to tackle the people smugglers. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've got more to say on this, of course, because the members opposite keep speaking about asylum seekers that have travelled from Iran, Iraq and other countries. But, of course, they've come from France, Madam Deputy Speaker, a safe country. They haven't come from Iraq, they've come from France. In the same way the lady opposite says they've come from Syria. They've come from France. They've paid people smugglers. And they don't claim that it's immoral to send people back to European countries where their claims can be considered there. It is literally, Madam Deputy Speaker, the logic of the opposition seems to be that Rwanda is a wonderful country, good enough to host international summits and world dignitaries, but not for people to be relocated there, as our global partnership has demonstrated. And they know that people are dying in the Channel, but they simply do not have a single workable solution between them. And they are choosing sides here, while this government is committed to pioneering a way forward. And of course, the party opposite are now clutching at straws when they come to speaking about money. But of course, you cannot put a price on lives that are lost, and we believe in saving lives and breaking the people smuggling model. And of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, when it comes to the claims, the legal claims that I think the Honourable Lady was referring to, pre-action protocol, NRM claims, I do not remember the lady opposite, the Shadow Home Secretary, making these points in this sort of synthetic hypothetical rage when she occupied the seat in a previous Labour government where they brought in acts and powers and passed the 1999 Act, the 2002 Act, the 2004 Act, basically to remove people with no legal basis to be in this country. And these are the same powers that we are using to remove individuals with no legal right to be in these countries. And of course, these are exactly the same powers that only recently and again today she was saying that could be used if we hadn't left the EU. And yet again, the Honourable Lady, the party opposite, talks about the policy being unworkable and extortionate, but it can't be both, because clearly we've said from the outset, that this is a partnership based on working with Rwanda. And if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is nothing more humane than turning a blind eye to those that are being smuggled, not just across the Channel, but also in lorries. And we have a global collective responsibility to work with international partners, which clearly the party opposite have shut the door firmly on doing.
Sir Mike Penning. much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I say from the outset that I know the Shadow Secretary of State very well, and she's much better than some of those comments that she came out with today. Much better. What I say to the Home Secretary, this country has, and as a child I was in school when people came from Vietnam and from Hong Kong previously and from Africa. But this is different. This Parliament is supreme. Our courts have said this is right. This is what the British people wanted us to do. Control immigration coming across in those boats. So how is it right that this court is overruled all of our courts and this Parliament?
My honourable friend, Madam Deputy Speaker, makes some very, very important points, first of all. He speaks to the generosity of our country, and I stand by that. And I think this government's record speaks very, very strongly in terms of supporting people from Afghanistan, Syria, Hong Kong, Ukraine, and the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that we have supported. And he rightly, Madam Deputy Speaker, speaks about our domestic courts in the same way in which I referred to in my statement. And I think it is important to say that, and to note that the courts have not challenged the legality of our policy. And in fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to take this moment to do something that the party opposites will not do, which is pay tribute to our officials in the Home Office, both in country and here, that have worked on developing the country programme, evidencing the legalities of the policy, but also the way we work with Rwanda, actually, as a country in terms of their own capability and capacity to house people. And these arguments have been challenged in the courts, and they've been well heard in the courts. If I may just make one final point, though, what is concerning, of course, is that our domestic courts have been very, very transparent in their decision-making and the way in which they've communicated their verdicts from the High Court, Supreme Court, and also the Court of Appeal, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is concerning, obviously, about the opaque nature in which last night's appeal was conducted by the European Court of Human Rights, in the way in which they informed the UK government around one individual. And of course, it's right that we spend time now going back to that court to actually get the grounds upon which they made their decision.
SNP spokesperson, Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My party continues to deplore this unworkable, illegal and immoral policy, and it does nothing to stop smugglers, and it inflicts serious harm on victims despite the Home Secretary's cloud cuckoo land description of it. So we wholeheartedly welcome the cancellation of this flight, and we condemn the reckless approach that the Home Secretary has taken to taxpayers' money and, more importantly, to the rule of law. And can I take a moment to commend, in fact, the lawyers involved for their incredible work in the face of some utterly inappropriate commentary from the top of government. And can I ask the Home Secretary to tell her colleagues to heed the call from the Law Society and the Bar Council and stop attacks on legal professionals who are simply doing their job. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is not the lawyers who caused this flight to be cancelled, nor any court. This flight was stopped because of the stench of yet more government illegality. And even the most ardent supporters of this dreadful policy must recognise that there is, to put it mildly, massive dubiety over its lawfulness. UNHCR, guardians of the Refugee Convention, are clear that it is in breach. So to seek to press ahead before the courts have concluded that issue, either way, was a reckless waste of taxpayer money and shows again this government's total disregard for the rule of law. So the Home Secretary should call this off now and wait for that court ruling. That is all we are asking in the meantime. And she should start answering the basic questions that we did not get answers to on Monday, about oversight, about age assessments, about screening for torture survivors and trafficking victims. This is a dreadful mess. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, inevitably this pitiful policy failure will now wrongly be blamed by the usual suspects in the European Convention on Human Rights. So will the Home Secretary recognise what the Prime Minister previously said about the Convention being a great thing? And will she recognise its importance for devolution, for the Good Friday Agreement, for the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and call off the agitators in her party who want the UK to follow Russia and Belarus through the exit door and onto pariah state status?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, as ever, and I think tone is important, actually, if I may say so in this debate, we respectfully disagree with the honourable gentleman and his party wholeheartedly. And that is, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we've heard throughout the debates on this subject previously, but also on the Nationality and Borders Act as it now is, thanks to the support that we've had from this side of the House to deal with smuggling and trafficking, but actually to change our laws. It's quite clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the party opposite would like to see all removals and all deportations, irrespective of their basis, full stop, and that is obviously their policy, and they would like open borders. But I think it is important, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I just put on the record, because this is important, that the European Court of Human Rights did not rule that the policy or removals were unlawful. But they actually prohibited the removal of 3 of those on the flight last night. That was at the end. So, and if I may say so, we have asked for that ruling in writing, so we're waiting for that. But those prohibitions are different to the other claims that came up from lawyers very last minute, actually, yesterday. And I think it is also important to recognise that the first ruling then provoked those solicitors involved to then go back to the courts, to then apply for more injunctions for the remaining people on the manifest. So I think it's important, Madam Deputy Speaker, to take an absolutely proportionate and measured approach before all parties opposite start to condemn a policy that actually the courts have not ruled as unlawful.
Natalie Elphick.
Madam Deputy Speaker, last November I stood on Dover's seafront and I mourned 27 people who were drowned in the English Channel. Of those people who'd been travelling in these small boats, these unseaworthy vessels, 7 were women, 1 was a teenager, and 1 was a 7-year-old child. In addition, up to 166 people are feared to have lost their lives or are missing across the Channel. People who were safe already. They were safe in France. Overnight, many of my constituents have got in touch with me. They are anguished at developments that have occurred to stop effective action to tackle the crossings. Can I urge my right honourable friend to continue to do everything possible to bring an end to these dangerous journeys? And can I ask her what representations she has received from the party opposite supporting action to bring these crossings to an end and save lives?
Thank my honourable friend for the very thoughtful way in which she's made her points but also asked her question this afternoon. And in particular, I do want to pay tribute to her and also to her constituents because they're on the front line. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I've spent a great deal of time both in my honourable friend's constituency and with her and with the professionals in her constituency, not just on border force, not just on the front line on the coast, but also her local authority that do a great deal of work when it comes to housing, providing sanctuary, providing support. And I think we should just take this moment to pay tribute to them because they're on the front line day in, day out, it is fair to say. And also I do just want to commend them for the way in which they work with Home Office officials and our operational teams. If I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, she speaks very, very strongly and powerfully about the lives that have been lost. And it's not just crossing the Channel, and I think this House should recognise this, it's not just crossing the Channel, it's crossing the Mediterranean, it's going through European countries, and sometimes even parts of Africa and the Sahel. And the conditions are absolutely appalling. And that journey that I have just spelt out, whether it's from North Africa, the Sahel, crossing the Mediterranean, going to EU member states, the EU member states are safe countries, and this is the model that we have to break. And it is a fact, actually, and we know this through the intelligence work, through UK intelligence network, that a lot of these gangs are based in European member states. And so, while I can't speak in more detail, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the wider work that's taking place, there's a lot of good cooperation, solid cooperation, actually led by this government, that has spurred action in EU member states to deal with the smuggling gangs and actually to go after the smugglers and make sure that they're prosecuted.
Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Permanent Secretary refused to sign off the Rwanda policy on the basis of the lack of evidence of value for money for the taxpayer. And it's only the second time in 30 years that the most senior civil servant in the Home Office had to be ordered by the Home Secretary to implement a policy. So in light of those concerns about wasting public money, can the Home Secretary confirm that on top of the payment of £120 million to Rwanda, the taxpayer will also now be picking up the £500,000 cost of the flight last night and all subsequent chartered planes, whether they take off or not, and whether the additional payments to Rwanda for people that they are expecting to arrive will be paid whether or not they actually arrive?
Well, Madam Speaker, if I may say so, first of all, when it came to our accounting officer advice, we should put this always into the context that asylum costs are soaring across the United Kingdom and have been for many, many years because of the number of people that are coming here illegally and the cost and the strain that that puts on, particularly during the pandemic, Madam Deputy Speaker. And if I may, the Right Honourable Lady will know this because this is something that has been discussed at Select Committee many, many times in her capacity as Chair and when she was on the committee when the Right Honourable Lady on the front bench was Chair of the committee, about COVID impacts on asylum specifically. Now, she's also asked about payments. We don't speak about operational costs right now for a range of reasons, because quite frankly, yes, it is taxpayers' money, primarily because of commercial sensitivities in terms of how we run our operations. And she will also recognise as well, I think the House should recognise, when we have mob rule turning up to thwart our charter flights, and some of them have ended up in courts before as well, it is right that we keep our commercial operators and their confidentiality and the way in which they work with the Home Office, but she has asked about the payment mechanisms to Rwanda as part of the partnership deal, and we'd be very happy to drop her a line and share that information with her.
Peter Bone.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. People who are trafficked into this country are duped or coerced. They are exploited for sexual or labour purposes. People who are smuggled into this country willingly pay to do so and come for economic purposes. The first are victims and deserve the protection of the Modern Slavery Act. The second are not and deserve no protection from the Modern Slavery Act. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is being abused by people who are coming across in small boats. I hope the Home Secretary can sort this out.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, I'd actually like to thank my honourable friend for his work on this issue. He's a very, very committed and passionate advocate, and also for the way in which he's actually worked with us in the Home Office on many of these challenging issues. There is a difference between trafficking and smuggling, and he himself is very, very aware of some of the issues that have been materially rising over a number of years, in fact, which thwart the removal and deportations, not just to people that come to our country illegally, but also foreign national offenders as well. And he is referring to the national referral mechanism and many of the challenges there that are now used, with intent, it's fair to say, by some of the specialist law firms when it comes to the claims that are being made. I look forward to continuing to work with him, because clearly it's in our interest, in our national interest, to ensure that we have the right safeguards in place for people that need our help and support, and that's what our Modern Day Slavery Act is about, but we cannot allow people to exploit it for the wrong means.
Alistair Carmichael.
Madam Deputy Speaker, why does the Home Secretary say, as she done her statement, it is no use pretending they are fleeing persecution when they are not? The Home Secretary will be aware that Home Office figures tell us that 98% of those who make the Channel crossing claim asylum. The same Home Office figures tell us that 64% of asylum applications are granted at first instance, and that rises to almost 80% after appeal. So there are only three options here. Either the Home Secretary, in demonising these people, is making an incorrect statement, or else the Home Office figures are incorrect, or else the Home Office is granting asylum applications to people who are not fleeing persecution. Which is it?
Deputy Speaker, if I may, there's a fourth option, which, if I may to the right honourable gentleman say that he is wrong on all counts, because it is a fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the individuals coming over the Channel are coming from a safe country, which is France. And with that, of course, well, he will be aware. He will be aware through the debates that we've had in this House on our Act of Parliament, National Anti-Borders Bill, the changes that are being made to immigration courts and tribunals to stop the repeated claims that go through the courts, to actually speed up processes and actually bring the scrutiny that's needed to stop claim after claim. We've just spoken about the exploitation of our system that we have to stop. That is effectively part of the measures and the changes that this government are determined to bring in, as well as, Madam Deputy Speaker, the long-term reform of our asylum system, which he and his party and the benches opposite voted against.
Kevin Hollinrake.
Mr. Speaker, in the absence of any practical workable policies on this from the opposition, I absolutely support her policy on Rwanda. I also support her policy on the establishment of reception centres in the UK, rather than asylum seekers being housed in hotels. But does she agree those reception centres have to be in the right location so they don't present an unfair or undue burden on any one community, including the 600 people who live in Linton-on-Ouse, who are expecting an intake of up to 1,500 young single men right in the centre of that village? Does she agree that policy should be reconsidered?
Hey, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I just give my thanks to the honourable gentleman, because we've been discussing this for some time and working together on this, and it's incredibly important, particularly on behalf of his constituents. And he has raised, with great candour, some of the challenges that he feels his constituents will face. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, with that, I have committed to work with the honourable gentleman, because reception centres are the right way forward. There's no doubt about that. So much so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the House will be interested to know that the European Commission has actually been paying for EU member states to build reception centres. And with that, of course, up to 500 million euros, even more than that. But with that, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have to have the right provisions and the right facilities within these reception centres, and that is exactly what we are working to achieve.
Chio Mora.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week, I finally received a response to an immigration query that my office sent last August. I have an asylum seeker who's waited 18 months just for an interview he still hasn't had, and many constituents desperately looking for passports which failed to arrive, and yet the Home Secretary is spending millions and millions of taxpayers' money on a policy which is as unworkable as it is inhumane. So why doesn't the Home Secretary put the work in, fix the issues in her Department of Process and Resource, instead of hiding her incompetence behind desperate refugees?
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to very, very politely disagree with the honourable lady for a change. And I think it's important to say, I mean, she's asked about the asylum case. She will know perfectly well, bear in mind her party supported being locked down throughout the pandemic for even longer than this side of the House did, that asylum decisions were not being made during the pandemic, and those interviews were not being granted because many of them were face-to-face, and now we have reformed the system to actually put many more online and things of that nature. That is the nature of the pandemic, and we are building upon that work, and she will know that. And it's a shame she voted against asylum reforms, the new plan for immigration. Madam Deputy Speaker, she mentioned passports. She, I'm sure, would welcome the resources in people, in staff around passports, and the work that has taken place with the Passport Agency, and the increase in demand. That's more blue passports this year that will be issued compared to previous years. And that is something, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd party opposite like to run down civil servants. That's quite clear in the hard work of people in the Home Office. We are, if I may, they can stop the finger pointing. We work together as a team to deliver for the British people. It's such a shame that the party opposite constantly vote against these changes and these measures.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
In the early 1950s, notably with the involvement of British lawyers, for very good reason. But does she agree with me that last night's decision undermined the original purpose of the convention by the court, and that the court stands a very real risk of losing the confidence of the British people as it seeks to undermine our domestic legal structures?
Speaker, if I may, my honourable friend makes a very, very strong and important point. And in fact, as I've touched on already, from the High Court to the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal, our policy, and there will be more legal action, we know this, our policy has not been found to be unlawful. There are very, very strong submissions based upon the evidence, actually the work that's taken place in country in Rwanda, on the efficacy not just of the policy but the delivery of the policy in country. That is absolutely right. I think the public will be surprised, there's no doubt about that. But Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's important to be cautious right now because of legal proceedings, just to finally say that we clearly are in touch with the European Court of Human Rights, because we do want to get their judgment, their decision in writing, which we have not had yet. And as I said earlier on, it is concerning when the British courts have been so public in terms of providing their summary and their positions that last night was very opaque in decision making.
Clive Effort.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, 444 people made the dangerous crossing in small boats, which suggests that the deterrent effect of this policy is not getting through. That's the highest number in 2 months since 681 crossed the day after she announced this policy. Doesn't that suggest that this is not the time for her to be cutting the National Crime Agency? Don't we need a bit of joined-up thinking here about dealing with this situation and dealing with the illegal traffickers?
Gentlemen, this is also not the time to sit on our hands and do nothing. And this government is determined to address these issues and work with all our agencies, intelligence agencies, crime agencies and law enforcement agencies to go after the people smugglers, which quite frankly, Madam Deputy Speaker, seems to be a policy the party opposite does not support.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Notwithstanding the niceties of this particular judgment, we are going to have to grasp the nettle and extend the principle of taking back control to the convention, aren't we?
My right honourable friend is trying to tempt me. Will know full-heartedly my own views on taking back control, but also on the need for controlled migration, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is at the heart of the work that this government is bringing forward. And with that, of course, building upon our Brexit opportunities, which is quite frankly, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we keep on learning day in, day out, the party opposite want to completely destroy and take us back into the EU.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary has the gall to talk about a moral response to this situation. The moral response would be to provide safe and legal routes for those people who are exercising their legal right to seek asylum. You know, this government doesn't even have a basic monitoring and safety process in place for this ugly policy. The monitoring committee promised in their memorandum of understanding with Rwanda still isn't going to be set up for several months. She's not even exercising the most basic care. Is that because she knows full well that if she did, then no decent committee or procedure would ever agree to trade refugees in this despicable way?
If I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do actually just want to come back to the grotesque mischaracterisation, of the country in question, Rwanda. And I think, you know, it is a shame and a stain, actually, in terms of, and she may actually like to read the country report and the work that has been done in country, and also in terms of the monitoring committee. That work is actually taking place, and we have had officials in country for weeks and weeks, in the 2 months, not several months, in the 2 months that we've made this announcement.
Kelly Tolhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And could I commend my right honourable friend for her determination to find solutions to a very real problem that our shores are facing, and trying to break that model of people smugglers taking advantage of incredibly vulnerable people. And today I have heard the same old story from Labour, no solutions, not standing up for Britain, and definitely not thinking about what my constituents want. Can my right honourable friend assure me and my constituents that she will continue in her determination to find those solutions to resolve this awful crimes that are happening on our coast?
Madam Deputy Speaker, and if I may, I would like to just thank my honourable friend for her comments, and if I may say so, as a fellow Kent MP as well, with my colleague from Dover. I know exactly how her constituents, how strongly they feel about this, and also the impact on constituencies in Kent, which sometimes I think members of the party opposite seem to forget about. She's asked me about our determination. Our resolution is strong, Madam Deputy Speaker. We will continue to carry on, not just with our work, but our commitment to break up the people smuggling gangs. And if I could just finally conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a real shame, but I think it is just worth leaving the House with this point right now, that over the weekend we have seen mob rule, including actually councillors in London from the party opposite, engage in mob rule to stop people from being removed and actually having the chance to be removed from our country, and having immigration enforcement take action against those with no legal basis to be in our country. We are determined, Madam Deputy Speaker, to do the right thing, despite the synthetic outrage that we get from many members opposite, and also, quite frankly, some of the appalling protests that we have seen involving some of the political activism from the party opposite.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As Home Secretary, she has a responsibility to uphold the rule of law. She can't only approve courts when they make decisions in her favour. So will she take this opportunity to affirm her support for the whole of the justice system, including the European Court of Human Rights and our membership of the European Convention? Because all we've heard from her today is smears and mudslinging directed at lawyers, courts and judges.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to put the honourable gentleman's comments into some context. There has been. I'm speaking to the honourable member directly through the chair right now, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, and he may want to calm down in terms of his synthetic outrage. There has not been a single slur. Madam Deputy Speaker, there has not been a single slur from myself to our judges or our courts. I've spoken about the processes of the courts, and it's right that we do that. And I think, secondly, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I think, if I may, you've heard me say already, there are legal processes in taking place right now, and it's right that we wait. It is absolutely right that we wait for the judgments to come forward, so that we work with the courts and our legal counsels in the right way on this matter, rather than, if I may say so, participating in this just sort of faux and synthetic yelling match that's taking place on the party opposite.
There's nothing more inhumane than evil people smugglers forcing people onto small boats and crossing the busiest sea lane in the world, placing them at risk. There is also, I would suggest to the Home Secretary, also it's inhumane to keep people waiting for months and months for a decision. So I understand that only 130 individuals were issued with protective notices. So can I urge my right honourable friend to speed up the process, to issue thousands of these notices, to put people on notice and then get people over to Rwanda so their cases can be resolved?
Well, my friend makes a very, very important point, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I agree with him, because this is not just about our processes, but as we are seeing now through legal challenges, that we work in the right way to make sure that, I guess, from an end-to-end perspective, everything is joined up, and that is effectively what we'll be doing through the challenges that have come forward. But I think it is important, just as a point of reflection, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman does speak about asylum cases. That is why we are reforming our asylum system. That's what the new plan for immigration was about, supported by this side of the House, supported by the British public, Madam Deputy Speaker, and constantly voted against by the other side.
Paula Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's fascinating that the Home Secretary talks endlessly about refugees travelling from France because it's such a safe country. The Memorandum of Understanding the Home Secretary signed makes clear that the UK will settle some of Rwanda's most vulnerable refugees, and the Home Office has briefed that this could be up to 50 people. So my question is, when will those refugees be arriving in Britain? And more importantly, on the basis of the Home Secretary's own argument, why do they need to if Rwanda is such a safe country?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, there are specific cases. I can appreciate the Honourable Lady speaking in very general terms. There are specific cases that the Rwandan authorities have raised with us for people that have been fleeing from persecution in the region. And as we've said, we're always a welcoming country. We look at those that need our help and support, and that is something that the Rwandan government themselves, because of the political situation in the region, there's a difference there, where they have asked us to work with them around specific cases, and we will actually do that because that is the right thing to do.
Daniel Kaczynski.
I'd like to pay tribute to my right honourable friend for showing the courage to implement this policy. I know that she is awaiting the final adjudication from the European Court, but when that is through, finally, will she show the same courage in making sure that she starts a debate in the Cabinet about leaving the European Convention of Human Rights? British law is used, maritime law is predicated on English law, many financial centres around the world use English law, many international disputes come to Britain to use British law. The fact that our Supreme Court decision has been thwarted in this way means it's time now to consider leaving the European Convention of Human Rights.
Well, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think, look, first of all, I do actually just want to, I think the honourable gentleman has made an important point actually about the standing of the UK's legal system in the world. It is one of the best in the world, even if you look at common law, commercial law, you name it. Many other countries obviously look to us in terms of our legal systems, our legal processes, and obviously the incredibly high standards that we have, and that is absolutely right. It would be wrong of me, Madam Deputy Speaker, to comment any further, and particularly in the context of this debate and the fact that it is right that I am in the process of going back to the European Court of Human Rights. And also, we will continue to work with the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court and the High Court, because it is important that we understand their rulings and work with them in every way possible to deliver our policy.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To hear the Home Secretary talk, you'd think that the European Court of Human Rights wasn't part of this country's legal processes. And the reason it is, and it's a very good libertarian reason, is, as one of its founders said, is that the European Court will be set up so that cases of the violations of the rights of our own body of 12 nations might be brought for judgment in the civilised world. Wise words about protecting citizens from overbearing governments who seek to deny their most basic rights. So will she just abandon this expensive mess? Because we know, as she said, there will be further legal action, further cost to the public purse here in the UK. And stop the attacks on the lawyers just doing their jobs in holding her to the law? Or does she think that Churchill was wrong?
Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, I'll refer her to the comments that I've already made in the House, and specifically take issue with her in terms of her comments, specifically saying that I am attacking lawyers, which is simply not what I've been doing this afternoon in this debate. It's a deliberate misrepresentation, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I think the Honourable Lady might even want to withdraw her comments.
Lee Anderson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, now then, just when you think this place can't get any dafter, you turn up and listen to that rubbish they're coming out with today. But is the Home Secretary aware of the sniggering and smugness and delight shown by the out-of-touch opposition benches over the cancelled Rwanda flight? And can she please advise me, I need some travel advice, I'm going away this summer, is France a safe country to go to?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think, if I may, I think for the benefit of probably the British people, actually, the public, I have here just 4 pages of a list of members opposite that's exactly making that point, with glee, basically, wanting the policy to fail, condemning it, saying all sorts of things, basically, without coming up with alternative solutions. My honourable friend is absolutely right when it comes to France as a safe country. And Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a fundamental principle in terms of working with our colleagues more broadly. More broadly, if you've already had your chance to speak, importantly, that these are safe countries and there are people that are effectively picking the UK to come to. That is something that we have to stop by going after the people smugglers and breaking up their business models.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Instead of attacking lawyers who represent desperate and frightened people,
attacking courts who give judgment on the European Convention on Human Rights. Why can't she just say very clearly that her government supports the European Convention on Human Rights as a protection of the rights of everybody amongst the signatory nations, and that this Rwanda policy is not just a shame, it's an utter disgrace, it's a dereliction of duty, and it's treating desperate people trying to find a place of safety in a difficult world like chattels that can be sent away somewhere else. Isn't this policy just a disgusting example of what this government is really about where human rights are concerned?
Madam Deputy Speaker, just if I may, due respect to the right honourable gentleman, we do disagree on many aspects, and in fact we've had debates previously in the House on various issues where we've disagreed on, and he's consistent, if I may say so, he's absolutely consistent in his approach. I do disagree with what he has said about our policy, and in light of the fact that we are currently going back to the courts, which is the right thing to do to get their judgments, I'm not going to comment any further on the European Court and their work, because I'm in the process of getting that judgment, and that is the right thing to do.
Thank you very much. This record on human rights is world leading, and this Parliament has passed resolutions in law that says that we must remove people who have entered this country illegally, and that has been upheld, as the Home Secretary has said, by our domestic courts. So it is deeply troubling that a supranational court seeks to delay this process. What discussions has she had with the Deputy Prime Minister about a renewed British Bill of Rights?
Well, my honourable friend has consistently made some excellent points and comments about removals policies in the past, and I think it's just worth reminding the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it's Acts of Parliament passed in 1999, 2002, 2004, which clearly enabled the government of the day to remove individuals with no basis to be in our country. Removal flights, for example. By the way, those acts were passed under a previous Labour government that they now completely are going against. But he has asked a very important question about discussions with the Deputy Prime Minister on the forthcoming Bill of Rights. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I can confirm that those discussions are active, work is taking place, and rightly so. And we will continue to deliver, Madam Deputy Speaker, as this whole government has been doing, on our manifesto commitments, because that is indeed where this stems from, and it's right that we do that. We're also, as part of delivering for the British people and delivering on Brexit, that we do change our laws so that our government and our laws are sovereign.
Karen Buck.
How does cutting the National Crime Agency by 20% deter people smugglers?
If I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a new line of attack from the party opposite. I'm not making cuts to the National Crime Agency. Let me be clear about that. I'm resourcing them, and if I may, the party opposite might have forgotten of the fact that we have a Russia-Ukraine crisis underway right now. The work that we brought forward with the National Crime Agency on the kleptocracy cell, the resourcing that's gone into enforcing sanctions and working with the Office of Sanctions. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is all the work of the National Crime Agency, where we've been giving them resource, empowering them to go after the people that do harm to our country. And yet again, the party opposite have not been supporting that.
Sammy Baines.
Deputy Speaker, my constituents include South, and people across the UK are generous and welcoming to refugees, particularly from Ukraine and elsewhere. But they have also voted consistently for controlled immigration and the right to secure borders. Would my right honourable friend agree that we have heard no practical solutions from the Labour Party opposite to combat the problems of illegal migration?
It is absolutely right, and if I may, my honourable friend knows how much I enjoy visiting his constituency, and a part of Wales. It's beautiful, it really is, and I know how strongly his constituents feel about this issue, and rightly so, because they want to see change, and that is what this government is committed to doing, which clearly the party opposite are not.
Howard Williams.
Deputy Speaker, government ministers from the Prime Minister down consistently signalled their hostility to the European Convention on Human Rights. This episode is a case in point.
But the Convention is fundamental to Welsh law, for example, the Rights of Children and Young Persons measure. Will the Secretary of State accept that a move away from the Convention would undermine Welsh law-making, which the overwhelming majority of Welsh people supports?
If I may, I'm going to refer the Honourable Gentleman to the comments that I've already made about the European Court's ruling.
Paul Bristow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Isn't this debate extremely simple? On this side of the House, we believe in saving lives, stopping evil people smugglers, and doing something about thousands of undocumented people landing on our shores week in, week out. On that side of the House, they back the ECHR ruling. They don't want to crack down on people smugglers, support open borders, and have absolutely no plan to deal with this problem.
Deputy Speaker, I completely agree with my honourable friend from Peterborough and the conviction in which he's just spoken.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the Home Secretary's watch, the number of people coming through very dangerous routes to our country has increased. And therefore, the Home Secretary talks about trying to address the issues with people smugglers, but by closing off safe routes, she's pushing people into the hands of people traffickers, making everybody's life more unsafe. When will she recognise the failure of her policy?
Deputy Speaker, I could refer the Honourable Lady to my statement earlier on, but I think it's always worth reminding colleagues in the House that for many years now it has been and is a global migration crisis. That is a fact. And every country around the world is speaking about this, not just in Europe, but over in America right now. And even the American administration are looking at similar policies. So how we tackle illegal migration requires new solutions, and that is effectively what we are doing, because we know existing approaches have worked. That means that we work with all our counterparts. That is the right thing to do, and it also means that change is needed, because we know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that people are dying, and that is effectively what we want to stop.
Kevin Williamson.
Speaker, I wonder if my right honourable friend would be able to update the House as to whether, since the French elections, as to whether the French government were having a more proactive approach of working with the UK government to tackle this issue at source, at the channel.
I right honourable friend for his question, because he's absolutely correct that post-elections, in fact pre-elections, Madam Deputy Speaker, there was a good deal of work underway in terms of taking the UK-French partnership and cooperation to another level, a new level. That work is underway right now. And even, in fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's just last Friday, our two teams came together to move forward this work, and that is very much under the instruction of the French government and obviously myself as Home Secretary, to not just look at improved cooperation, but actually move into the territory where previously the French government was slightly more hesitant to work with us on more cooperation. So there is a great deal of work underway, so let me give him that assurance.
Barbara Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Home Secretary confirm that the Home Office itself withdrew people from the flight on Friday and yesterday because it accepted they were victims of torture or trafficking? She's already been asked that question. She didn't answer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, she will know that individuals are removed from the flight manifest when their representatives make claims, and that's when they are removed. And we have to remove them when their representatives make claims, because we then have to look into those claims and investigate those claims through the court.
Mark Jenkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've seen the opposition, charities in receipt of government funding, a minority of my right honourable friend's own civil servants and now European judges intervene to block the will of the British people. To borrow a slogan already used by my honourable friend for New Forest West, when will we take back control?
Friends, speaks, I think it's fair to say my honourable friend is frustrated by the events that have taken place, and understandably so, because so are the British people. So are the British people, which is why I will continue in our collective will and determination with this policy, but also to bring in the changes. We've just passed the National Anti-Borders Act. There is work that we need to do, and we're just going to get on with the job.
Stephen Ferry.
Thank you. In terms of myth-busting, there is no requirement in international law for asylum seekers to claim asylum in the first country. And indeed, there are many legitimate reasons why people may choose to come to the UK. And I'm grateful for the check and balance that we have from the European Court. Now, the Home Secretary has avoided giving a clear commitment to the future of the European Convention on Human Rights, so maybe I could ask the question in a different way. Over the past week, government ministers, in relation to the protocol, have been stressing their newfound undying commitment to all aspects of the Good Friday Agreement. The Convention is hardwired into that agreement. Does she therefore agree it is untouchable?
Deputy Speaker, if I may, because of the legal proceedings that are taking place and the fact that I am waiting for the court judgment, which is the right thing to do, I'm not going to preempt any remarks or comments around the European Court on Human Rights.
Madam Speaker, I congratulate my right honourable friend on her statement. She has my full support to carry on with the determination she has shown throughout. But does she share my fear that this is about saving lives and this is about stopping the people smugglers? And the longer those that do seek to keep this in the courts and going about legal acrobatics seriously risk the smugglers preying on more people and potentially more people sadly losing their lives.
Absolutely right, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is why the Department has been working overnight to secure the judgment so that we can actually put responses back. It's right that we do this because there was no point dragging these processes out because, quite frankly, people will continue to die and people will continue to be smuggled. And with that, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is why we will continue with our policy of removals and deportations to third countries and safe countries, because that is the right thing to do, because we have to strain every sinew to break up these smuggling gangs.
Dr. Rupert Hutt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary claims that this policy will destroy the business model of the evil people traffickers, which sounds good. But when Israel adopted the identical policy, every single deported asylum seeker attempted escape from Rwanda, many successfully, straight into the arms of those same people smuggling rings. So, in fact, it fed the model rather than smashing it. So, you know, when is she going to admit that this worked example that we see of where it's been trialled shows us that this policy that's been slammed by royalty, clergy, the lot, is just immoral, expensive and unworkable?
Deputy Speaker, and with all due respect to the Honourable Lady as well, I disagree with her profoundly because it is not the same. It is not the same agreement that the country that she mentioned with Rwanda has in place. This is a migration and economic development partnership where we are investing in the people that will be removed to Rwanda, where not only are they housed and taken care of, but have the opportunity to rebuild their lives. That is fundamental to the government of Rwanda and actually their resettlement policies that they have already had successfully in place. So she cannot compare this to another previous policy whatsoever. And it is important that we continue so that we can demonstrate in quarters that this will work in terms of breaking up the people smuggling model, but also show that we can provide new opportunities in safe countries around the world.
Young.
My constituents support this policy, this House supports this policy, and polling shows that the country supports this policy. Doesn't last night's decision mean that we must now fast-track our plans for a new British Bill of Rights and ensure that this democratically elected House is able to deliver on the will of the British people?
Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, the voice of Redcar speaks with great conviction, blackberry and determination, as ever, when he makes his representation. And he would have heard my comments with regards to the British Bill of Rights. That work is underway right now, and that is, of course, for the Deputy Prime Minister to announce in due course, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Dulles.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent, Azazula, is among many, around 80 families in my constituency who have relatives who are still stuck in Afghanistan. He's been in regular contact with me since Afghanistan fell, and he sent me a message yesterday to say the Taliban are abusing his brother, trying to find his father and threatening their execution. Would the Home Secretary, in my constituent's family's shoes, would she stay in Afghanistan and wait to be executed, or would she advise them to try and get to safety in Glasgow any way they could, because there is no safe and legal route for Azazula's family and the other 80 in my constituency?
Hey, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course, specifically with Afghanistan, there has been a scheme for people from Afghanistan to come over. So if she's very welcome to share details with the refugee ministers. Well, Well, then I'm happy to get the response for her. If she would like to send me the details, then I will absolutely pick that up.
Bailey.
Deputy Speaker, the interim judgment of the Strasbourg court yesterday did not say the government's policy was unlawful or illegal, and any suggestion in this chamber is at best incorrect and at worst misleading. But does my right honourable friend find it surprising that she's been criticised for enacting a policy that is a democratic mandate given to our government by millions of people throughout this country, many millions of them ex-Labour voters who will be aghast at the position that's been outlined by the opposition today?
Deputy Speaker, if I may also just thank my honourable friend for his comments. He's absolutely right, because the British people absolutely voted for change. And in constituencies such as his, and in other constituencies such as my colleague for Redcar, my colleague for Stoke-on-Trent as well, and many other constituencies, the public wanted change. We are committed to delivering that change, and we will continue, undeterred, to deliver on the people's priorities.
Zara Sultana.
I'd like to pay tribute to the campaigners, the activists and the lawyers who stopped the flight last night. The benches opposite might heckled, but they stopped this disgrace of a government from trading people who fled war and persecution for money. That is a policy that should shame us as the Bishop of Coventry, a proud city of sanctuary, and dozens of religious leaders have said. And let's get a few things straight here. It's not about stopping people trafficking, it's about whipping up hate, it's about dividing communities, and it's about distracting us from the failures of this government. Because if the Home Secretary really wanted to help refugees, if she had a single ounce of compassion, she would bin this inhumane policy, and instead she would create safe and legal routes to help refugees live and rebuild their lives in Britain. Will she do that?
Speaker, I hope the Honourable Lady, when she calms down, will withdraw her personal slur against me.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have full confidence in my right honourable friend. This is going to be attritional. It's going to be attritional, but you'll win out in the end. In terms of cost, there will be a short-term cost of this scheme, but the hope is that it will become a deterrent and over time that cost will fall. Does my right honourable friend agree? But actually, the status quo will end up costing far more because it's an escalating, potentially never-ending problem which could potentially bring our public services to their knees through unprecedented demand.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend for Ipswich is absolutely right. And of course, he's speaking about the cost of doing nothing, which is something that this government will not do. And it's right that we look at all avenues, all policies, and changes to our laws when necessary to ensure that we do everything, not just to deter people smugglers and breaking up those gangs, but ensuring that people come to our country through the legal routes that we have. Our points-based immigration system, Madam Deputy Speaker, is absolutely an illustration of that, but also through the safe and legal routes that this government has put in place, which quite frankly, the party opposite have never supported and constantly campaign against through their mob rule and the type of protests that we saw at the weekend, which the Honourable Lady on the back benches has been supporting.
Florence Ashlomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Seeking asylum is a basic human right, and we should be protecting people fleeing war and persecution. I thank the many constituents in Vauxhall who show that compassion and have written to me about this deeply inhumane policy. Madam Deputy Speaker, I flagged up with the Home Secretary the treatment of LGBT people seeking asylum, and I wrote to the Home Secretary on the 21st of April seeking assurances that the deal which she mentioned has that legal agreement. To date, I haven't received a reply. Can the Home Secretary now assure us that this deal that she has agreed does have that assurances to protect LGBT people?
Speaker, I apologise that the Honourable Lady has not had a response, and after the statement I will go and find out what has happened to that. If I recall rightly, the Honourable Lady did raise this on the floor of the House when we last had this debate, and we did discuss human rights and also LGBT rights in Rwanda as well. And if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I did say back then that Rwanda's own constitution outlaws discrimination. Rwanda does not criminalise or discriminate against sexual orientation in law. And importantly, our policy is cognizant of that and fully compliant in terms of these laws and our own domestic laws.
Alexander Stafford.
Speaker,
my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, confirm that despite this despicable ruling from the Foreign European Court of Justice, that we are committed to relocating illegal immigrants to Rwanda? And when can we look forward to in Rwanda wheels down Kigali for the first flight?
Mr. Speaker, if I can, I could note my honourable friend's enthusiasm for this government's work and policy when it comes to removals and deportation. And it is an important point because we have, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've said a few times now, during this statement, we are working to receive the judgment from the European Court. That is right that we do that. It's right that we go through all the processes, but our policy is lawful, and we will continue, and I can give him and his constituents every assurance that we will continue.
Lillian Greenwood.
Madam Deputy Speaker, a few minutes ago the Home Secretary appeared to confirm that she considers Afghans to be in genuine need. There were reports of Afghans on this planned flight. Are those reports correct?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may just restate, as I have said in my statement, that those individuals that were due to be on this flight had travelled to our country legally through safe countries where they could have claimed asylum.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend will understand and share the frustration of the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork after foreign judges have meddled with our UK legal system and our UK Parliament. But they will not be shocked, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the sneering and snarling from the Labour Party opposite, who like to look down upon the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork for backing Brexit and this government for taking back control of our borders. Will my right honourable friend confirm that a British Bill of Rights will indeed help in way to make sure that these flights can take off and that this policy will flourish?
If I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend spoke about the sneering that's taking place from the party opposite, on the front bench in fact, as we've been hearing. Well, one of the strongest working MPs for Stoke-on-Trent and his great constituents have had one of the most vocal advocates for them in this House. Madam Deputy Speaker, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right in his comments, and we will continue our work.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if the Home Secretary realises the extent to which her determination to pursue this immoral, expensive and already failing policy is damaging the firm and fair immigration system to which she says she's committed, to the extent that amongst the many, many complaints and letters I have from constituents about immigration issues at the moment is one from someone who has sponsored a youngster then in Ethiopia for 18 years and has been refused a visa to bring him over for a visit this summer on the grounds that the forms were not filled in correctly and there was a problem with the interview. The interview never took place, and the forms which were incorrectly filled in were filled in by the former member for Edinburgh West, my predecessor as MP, who is well acquainted with the immigration system. So will she stop this obsession and deal with those issues?
I may. I've not seen her case. She's very welcome to bring that to me. I'd be very happy to look at that. But as I've said throughout this statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will continue with our policy and we will continue in our determination to break up the people smuggling gangs and actually work with our global partners to find solutions to these problems.
Final question, Neil Coyle.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we know ministers have formed for breaking rules and wasting public funds, but will the Home Secretary stop hiding the figures and tell us how many millions of pounds of taxpayers' money will her government squander before the outsourcing of asylum policy, so roundly condemned by our Church of State and our next head of state, is eventually and inevitably proved unlawful?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, I'm going to refer the honourable gentleman to the comments that I've made in my statement.
I thank the Home Secretary for her statement, and we now move on to presentation of Bill. Secretary Therese Coffey.
Social Security Additional Payments Bill.
Second reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Thank you. We now move on to presentation of Bill. Stuart C. MacDonald.
Neonatal Care Leave and Pay Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 15th of July.
Friday, the 15th of July. Thank you. Dan Jarvis.
Protection from Redundancy, Pregnancy and Family Leave Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 9th of September.
Friday the 9th of September. Sir Mark Hendrick.
Greg Smith, isn't it?
Greg Smith, I do beg your pardon.